I'd like to try and set the stage for the rest of the day, if I might. Excuse me. For those of you who may be newer to Tanenbaum's work, we are a secular, non-sectarian, not-for-profit. Our mission is to combat religious prejudice, to promote justice, and to build respect for religious difference. And we've been in existence for 33 years. Of those 33 years, the workplace program is 28 years old. So it was the second effort that we created, that our president and founder created, and then my predecessor, Joyce Dubinsky, built upon in this idea, this experiment, if you will, not so much wholly in a secular organization, but this experiment of where are the gaps in the ways in which religion, spirituality, and we would come to understand more the experiences of people who are unaffiliated, who are not religious, who are atheists, agnostics, spiritual but unaffiliated, or having no relationship to religion at all. How do we actually, and what is our work to make sure that the experiences of people who identify in this way are experiencing equity at work? Our work started with interns just doing research on what's being offered in workplaces around the dimension of religion. And then a survey that we did in 1999 of religious minorities, meaning people who did not identify as Christian in the United States, and what their experiences were at work. That laid the foundation for what we now call the 10 bias danger signs. The membership program that Tanenbaum has, the Tanenbaum membership program, is 13 years old this year. And we started the program because we needed a more functional way to provide and deliver all of the resources that we had available, and to stop people from calling us and scheduling meetings allegedly to find out more about our organization so they could get free consulting. That's kind of how that happened. And as you might have, a sense of now, I got really tired of really fast. The idea that people would misrepresent themselves in that way and then seek to ask us to give away what they clearly knew we were trying to sell. This is our 9th Religious Diversity Leadership Conference. And we actually thought we had more time when we started the membership program. In the first year, we had about 5 members. In the second year, I think there were like 12. By the third year, we had about 25 members. And then the members started asking, so is there going to be a time where we can all get together and share information and share resources and find out what other people are doing? And it's kind of like, yeah, there'll be a moment for that. And they were kind of like, well, when is that going to be? Like, is that going to be like soon or sometime in the murky future? And we held our first summit. It was 2.5 hours. It was an afternoon before our gala. That has moved into this, hosting a conference in Philadelphia for over 120, I think, registered attendees, in addition to another 120 via Zoom. So I welcome you into living history of the advancement and the exploration of religious diversity at work. None of these things, as much as this social media would present them to us or media presents it to us, nothing is ever just about our personal experience in the moment. We are a moment in a continuum throughout history of this thing called religion and work. Some of the things, we did a survey in 2013, and a lot of what we saw in our survey is actually borne fruit, has come to pass. We saw in our survey that when you had workplaces that were more religiously diverse, you were going to be more likely to experience conflict. You have people who don't necessarily know each other that well. And people say to me all the time, well, you live in New York City and there's so much diversity there. And I try and remind people, New York City is a place where people live next to one another. But we don't always live with one another. That happens when there's a blackout. And there's no power, and now there's no power, there are no devices, there's no streaming, there's no internet, all of your devices are exhausted, and you have no choice but to get out of your hot house or apartment and go outside and see somebody else who also has no power and no streaming. And you then start talking about why you have no power and no streaming. And, oh, by the way, how's your life? So these are the kinds of things that we knew were going to happen. And that's why it makes such a difference for all of you to be here, all of you who are joining us via Zoom, to continue the work around religion in the workplace. But today, in 2025, we are faced with a number of the current challenges that we're facing, I say, are deeper expressions of challenges we've always been facing. When we look at the ongoing impact of October 7th, the backlash against diversity, equity, and inclusion, which, by the way, didn't start with this administration. People have been fighting for the legitimacy of diversity, equity, and inclusion since affirmative action programs began. This is not a new thing. It's a new way of talking about it, and it's quite aggressive, but it's not new. And then the urgency of just navigating faith on global teams. We are a globalized society. And to Vaughn's point, what gets created at that macro US level or country level doesn't always trickle down economics, doesn't always trickle down to the local communities. So we have to make sure that it rains down as opposed to hoping that it will trickle down when we have these ideas that we create on these large scale levels. The summit theme is about building community. And I think that it's important that we kind of take a look at what we mean by community, because for me, community is a term that is being thrown around and bandied about as if we all mean the same thing about it. And I think that there's more to it than just what we're bringing up. So if we bring up the definition, we have this definition, and I shared an article with you on I think it's pronounced Huva, it might be Wova, I'm not sure, but on the app that we're using, I shared an article with you that's called The Practice of Community, Metaphors and Models for Creating Authentic Community. And I want you to consider, not just while I'm talking, but through the course of this day, that community is not just a gathering of people, but it is a dynamic that we practice. It is something that we create. It is not just a gathering of people who might be like-minded. I like this definition from the article: a group of people that have made a commitment to learn how to communicate with each other at an ever more deep and authentic level. I'm going to read that again. A group of people that have made a commitment to learn how to communicate with each other at an ever more deep and authentic level. Now consider this definition when you think about either communities that you are a member of or communities that you relate to or work with. This is a little bit more. This requires a little bit more than just showing up because you happen to be a particular identity. This is showing up with an intention and with a purpose to actually get something done. And I'd like for you to consider, how does this definition relate to your work? Like the specific work that you do, whether it's around religious diversity or not, how does this definition relate to your work? How does it relate to your workplace or your company? Is this idea really not what community is where you are? And it's fine. This is not the last and only definition of community, but there's something about this definition that invites us to consider not just who we are, but how we are with each other. Another concept in this article is a model of practice for a community. And it talks about 4 stages, that there are 4 stages that groups go through in their journey to this final stage called authentic community. So I'm just going to tell you to take a deep breath now, because it's about to get a little raggedy. I promise it'll be fine at the end, but it's going to get a little rocky. So the first stage is called pseudo community. Pseudo community. Pseudo communities pretend that they are a community, that they're already a community. And what often happens is that it's a group of people who feel like they have found their people. There is this experience of like a like-mindedness, that we agree, that isn't it wonderful that we found each other? And it's all great, except that there is very little capacity to actually talk about differences. So everything is at a very surface level. And the rules are, like the unspoken rules are, we don't talk about anything that's going to upset anyone. We can't really afford to do that, because unspoken, we know how tenuous our relationships are. They haven't been tested in any way. This is a great place to be, but I don't want to mess it up with controversy. I don't want to mess it up with hard questions. So if I have a feeling about something, even if I feel offended, I'm just going to swallow that. I'm just going to put that to the side and not really address it, because I don't want to rock this boat, because this boat means a lot to me. So I'm just going to kind of let bad behavior go on. That's pseudo community. Sound familiar? Well, now we go on to the next stage, which is called chaos. And it is as it sounds. It is chaos. So in the stage of chaos, so something to be mindful of, you don't just kind of enter into the stage of chaos. So imagine you're in that first stage of pseudo community, but you somehow, there's this commitment that there's more than what we're experiencing. There's more that we could be. And that we really have this idea of a way that we could be that we haven't been before. And the people who are able to survive the stage of pseudo community move into the stage of chaos. And in the stage of chaos, kind of like, the old Get Smart. Chaos was the name of the organization. The whole focus of this stage is that differences are not ignored, but they seek to be obliterated. And this stage is really driven by this idea that in order to be here, in order to stay in this community, you need to think about things the way I think about them. Your way of thinking about things is wrong, and I'm going to help you fix yourself. We're going to get rid of all of these ideas that really are not in line with what we're trying to accomplish. And if you can't find your way into understanding that, then there's probably some other place for you to be. Now imagine it's not just one person doing this. It's multiple people all talking about what they think the right thing is and how they're going to change and fix the others so that they can kind of get right in their minds about this community that we're trying to create. You're wrong. You should believe like I do. Or I'm right, and believe me when I tell you what I tell you because I know I'm right about what I'm telling you. That's the stage of chaos. And one of the other dimensions, some of the other experiences that you see is that fractions begin to form. Little groups inside the group. And it could just be 2 or 3 people off to the side or after the meeting, then they have another meeting. And then even those 3 people, 2 of the 3 people might have yet another meeting about what the 3 people meant. Because now everybody is trying to fix somebody else. Gossip becomes very, very key and the primary way in which people operate, meaning that they don't talk to each other. They talk about each other to other people. But indirect conversation is always going on, and it tends to be the general way in which anything gets communicated. And then there is this moment where people will experience either the need to quit because they want to get away from the conflict. But even getting away from the conflict has its own dimension of, I'm better than them because I got out. And many groups will self-destruct at this point. Chaos becomes kind of as far as they go because they can't work together. They have there's nothing that's guiding them forward. Take a deep breath. I know it's probably a little bit more familiar than you wanted to hear first thing in the morning. But I said that there's some hope coming. So in that group, in that moment of chaos, there are still people who can see that this is just a stage. And they may have been in another group where they experienced a similar kind of thing, where they saw the pseudo-community stage. They went through the chaos stage, and they know that there's something else beyond it. So beyond chaos, the next stage is called emptiness. And in the stage of emptiness, groups, communities actually begin to talk about everything that has been in the way of the creation of community. They begin to actually surface and speak from a first-person perspective, not just how they feel, not just what has hurt them, but they also begin to talk about how they have contributed to the stage of chaos. What their unique fingerprint was, because it's always easy for us to talk about, or easier for us to talk about how we've been hurt, how we've been disrespected, how we've been left out, but it is far braver and requires more for each of us to talk about what was the droplet of gasoline that I threw on the fire. And that I'm going to be accountable that I had something to do with the stage of chaos, including saying or doing nothing when I saw it going on. And in this stage, you can imagine the people who are participating in this stage are very clear that there is still something worth building for. There is something worth this entire experiment to lay themselves bare and to make themselves vulnerable to one another. And they ask the question, how am I creating to this collective space being less safe for everyone? And they answer that question. They don't just ask the question as a hypothetical, they answer the question, and the answer of that question becomes the way in which they begin to behave differently. It becomes a new contract for them, a new understanding of how they can be a contributing part, a necessary contributing part to their community. And then finally, the last stage is the creation of authentic community, or just community. And in this space, one of the ways the article, and you'll be able to read it on your own, but one of the ways the article talks about the experience of community, I see my friend, Reverend Simone Gelazou, who is here, a colleague from One Spirit, but also a member of the Friends community. And if you can imagine, the way groups communicate at this level is that someone says and offers something, not to persuade, not to convince. It is merely just the way in which they see the world. And then someone else offers something else that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what the first person said, but it is what their authentic expression is. And then a third person shares, and they share something else, and it just goes on this way. There is a deep and profound respect and understanding that anything that is shared for the good of all. Any action that is taken for the good of all. So as we start this day, I'm asking you to consider what is the practice of community that you engage in first. And if we go to the next slide really quickly, you'll notice that all of these stages start with the I. They start with you and how you're interacting and seeing others in these groups that you call communities, that you are either members of or supporters of, but they start with you. So this is an inside-out process. It's not just about talking about what other people are doing. You need to be equally, if not more, responsible for what you're doing. We have become such an individualistic, grounded society, global society, that we don't care at all for the impact of our actions on others. And we are subsumed with being right. So for today, till 5 o'clock, till the cocktail hour, just consider, what are you bringing to these conversations around community? And what are the actions you've been engaging in? And even if you feel like you were justified to do it, and you were right to do it, and you were driven by pain, I get all of that. But be accountable for it. And let's not put it off on circumstances or the times we're in or unprecedented times, because you know what? You were acting like that before the unprecedented times started. And maybe acting like that when the unprecedented times end. If we don't pay attention and potentially do something different. Individuals make up communities. Individuals make up communities. And so if we're building community, if our theme for the day is building community and then taking action, part of what's needed is for you to build yourself and pour into yourself. Let these next 6 hours be about you pouring into yourself so that you have new actions to take, not just making yourself comfortable with the same old actions you've been taking, hoping for a different result. Someone a long time ago called that the definition of insanity. When we change, communities change. When we don't, communities stay the same. So when we build community, when we built ourselves, something moves, something shifts, something changes. If we don't do any of that, things stay the same. And then there's really, when things stay the same, because we're unwilling to change, then we should just be able to acknowledge that. Not like it's the end of it, but just that's where we are at the moment. In today's programming, which we're going to get to in Port Thomas, is I'm coming, Thomas. I'm going to stop now soon, just a minute. I've got Thomas like standing up in the back of the room, kind of like, land the plane. He's back there doing like this. Oh, I love our people. So really just the big takeaway is all of the sessions that you'll hear today, the conversations that you have at your tables, all are around building community by building yourself, by noticing the actions you've been taking, and by considering and developing in this time the capacity to take new action, to maybe take different action, or to take action that is a little bit more authentic to what you're trying to accomplish. You'll see on the table, there's a card placed in front of each one of you. It's not a coaster, so take your coffee off of it. But so we put these cards on the table just as a way to begin self-reflection for everyone. And you don't have to stay with that one card, but the invitation really is to answer that question on the card to yourself, and then maybe share something that share an insight that you had from engaging in that activity. And then maybe ask somebody next to you, what card did you have? What question are you pondering? And then if you like somebody else's card, at lunch, switch cards with them. Even if they didn't ask, just switch the cards on the table. But let this be a day of exploration. And really inside of this theme of building community and taking action, that is the invitation, not just a welcome, but that is the invitation for all of you. And for all of you joining us virtually, the invitation today is to build yourself and build community.